So I want to talk about involving students and then also thinking about the role of student voice in our meaningful assessment of student learning. And I very much thank you for the lovely introduction. I want to say two things that I think are very helpful to place the way that I approach assessment. One, my background is not in measurement. My background is actually in philosophy. And so I think assessment is, in my mind, it is the thing that philosophers should be running with. It has questions of epistemology. It's got ontological questions, there's ethical questions, all these things that are about like, what are we really doing in our practice? I think are drive it instead of what should I be putting in place to do to fill out forms. And so you'll see at different points in times where I'm pulling in questions and perspectives from philosophy. And I also try to do it through a humorous lens at times. I think it's important to assessment can be a bit dry and to engage in humor. However, I'm very aware that my jokes are moderately funny. That's fun. They're entertaining for me, so I hope you'll indulge. And sort of last point is I am a fast talker and I am aware of this. And it's one of those things where I'll hear myself and I'm like, you should really slow down. This is a very important point. And I talk. I am not as fast as the Micro Machine Man. If you remember these commercials at all from the 80s. If not, included in this in the slides that you'll get are links to things. And so if you want to watch a YouTube video of a Micro Machine commercial, you can have that enjoyment experience. But I am a fast talker. So again, do please feel free to pause, to ask me any questions, to have me go back over a point that I've made or anything like that as we engage. And two kind of themes that you'll hear throughout this are students. And how do we talk about telling our stories about why we're doing what we are for the students that we serve, and not students that we wish we had or the students that we used to have, but the students that we have today. Why are we doing and asking of them the things that we are? Why this and not something else are really important to that work. So in assessment, you also need to know that I love it. I think it's the bee's knees. I read articles and I fold them into little heart shapes and I'm like, this was so much fun. I think it's great. I think that assessment can be an incredibly powerful tool for learning, but I think we need to look at it prismatically. So looking at it in a multifaceted manner where we're thinking about the different ways in which our work can make sense in our place, in our context, and for our students. So if I get like really excited, I'm like, isn't this amazing? It comes from a positive place of my love of this field. So what do I want to do with our time together today? Well, I want to kind of chunk this into why should we involve students? So if you are going out and you want to do this work and you're running into any like, well, why isn't what we're doing fine? Or I don't know why we'd want to involve our students or get more student voice in this work, you are prepared to engage in a dialogue or whatever you might like around why we should be involving our students in this process. But I also want to give you how and where might we involve our students? What are people doing? What's working? Where is student voice a part of this work? Where are there opportunity spaces across our institution for doing it? And then of course, throughout, resources for doing that as much as I can. I try to make them open access, and if not, other links, ways to get to things, and then any questions and discussions that you have if there's something you're trying to do and you want to talk about it. So we will now hold hands, ride bicycles into the ocean. I don't know the thought process behind this picture, but I feel like it's a good use of what we're going to do. So I'm going to start with why are we involving students? And again, please do feel free to stop me at any point in time in this. So to kind of level set on the meaningful assessment part and our student involvement, I want to just get some definitions in place. So when we talk about assessment of student learning in the field or the scholarship area, most often what is being referred to is this systematic collection of data that we're looking about educational programs or offerings or courses or whatever that might be that we do because we want to improve student learning and development. So we want to see, is this working for which students in what ways, and then make changes to make it better. It is not just testing or grading, although the lovely part about assessment is the word is also used for an attest or those kinds of things. So, linguistically there, we're doing a good job. It is also a discipline and a scholarship. So there are disagreements that we have within our own area on how to go about doing this work, what it is that what people are doing when they're assessing. So there are many ways to go about assessment, and we're not just doing it for compliance. So it's not just because we have to or something's happening and accreditors are coming or whatever that may be, and then we need to engage in it. For me, though, the way that I really kind of try to position the work of doing assessment is more from an alignment with this definition, which is at the heart of what we're trying to do is we're taking a collection of things that our students have done at different points in times, and from that, trying to draw inferences more broadly about what they know and can do. right? So we're doing this evidentiary reasoning exercise. That is clearly my philosopher hat coming through there on what it is that we want to engage in. And part of that process means that we're saying we think it's important if you take this course because in this course you learn the following things, and the way that you learn that and demonstrate it are through these activities. So it's a way that we justify in some regards assumptions and beliefs that we have about students and their learning and the role that we play in getting them to that learning. So we're like, we think you should do these things as a WMU student so that you can have these experiences and walk away or leave our institution having learned these things and engaged in that manner. However, if it is about these perceptions and beliefs and assumptions that we have about what students need and where learning happens and that kind of things, to the extent that our assumptions do not actually reflect our student experience, we now have a data issue. So if we're looking at something that comes in from students and we're saying, students are learning in this way, and it's based on an idea of how students go through and what they need to learn or how they show us that they learn, and that doesn't line up, we're going to make changes that mismatch with what our students need and how they go. And this is more important today than ever before because the theories and our models and our data, things that we've had for our students aren't really holding and accurate in the same way because our student experience has shifted dramatically. And the only way that we can know sort of where our students are and what's going on with them is to check in and see, how are you? What is happening? So I want to share with you some national data. And while this was focused on students, so it was surveys that went out to incoming students, current students, and students that were leaving an institution nationally. This data is very similar to faculty and staff survey responses at this time. So if you're seeing this and you're like, I felt that way, you're not wrong. These are very similar, but I'm going to focus on the student responses. Of the students that were still in college, 58% in 2001 said, I feel really unprepared. I don't know what I'm going to be experiencing. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I don't know how to set myself up for success. I just feel generally unprepared. 52% said they learned less that year. And part of this is due to destruction. Well, maybe that wasn't a Freudian slip. Due to distraction and ability to concentrate on the work that they're doing, it's taking them more time to complete coursework than prior. So if it's taking you longer to do it, you are more distracted while you're doing it, you're retaining less information during that time period. However, on the positive side, 59% of students said that their professors were very accommodating. They were like, they gave us extra time, they were flexible in what we needed, and responsive to where we were as students as we were going through this. Currently, that is not the case. It's sort of like, all right, we're done. Get back in, turn things in. We need to get back into it. The same survey went out in 2002, asking students, where are you? How are you feeling? 65% were like, I am unmotivated. I can't get myself to do the things that I need to go into. 58% had difficulty concentrating, which we know from before is linked to what we're learning and how much we're retaining. 50% reported mental health concerns, meaning that it was enough that they were going to seek assistance and help related to that. 48% reported feeling behind academically in ways that they would never catch up, which is exactly how we lose students from our institutions. And 18% reported housing concerns or basic needs related to housing being unmet. In around that same year, we sent a survey out to assessment professionals and faculty and staff that are engaged in assessment. We're like, how are we doing? What is going on? And one of the things that was very clear was an agreement on we have to center people. We need humanizing practices. We need restorative approaches that would hopefully guide what our policies and our communications are as we move forward to be mindful of where our populations that we're engaging with entail. In 2023, you're like, did we do it? Did that happen? Maybe, yes or no. Same survey went out to students. I will say though, they added questions instead of just, here's your responses of sadness. They added some questions of, what would you like to see happen or what do you want differently done for students? 47% were like, I am struggling, balancing schoolwork, home responsibilities, other things that are happening in my life. School is not my priority. It's one thing of many. And depending on what's going on in these other spaces, I will step out of this school. 39% were struggling with mental health in ways that hindered their ability to learn. That's how that one was slightly changed in the survey. But then they were like, okay, 57% said faculty were being more flexible. If they were, that would help. So if they're like, what do you need to succeed? Like flexibility would be great. 51% wanted different teaching styles. And the follow-up question, they said, what kind of teaching styles? And students were like, I have no idea, just different ones. Something different in that space. 42% wished for clear expectations on what it was that they were supposed to be doing or what they needed to focus their attention on in those spaces. And 34% wished that there was just more of a general interest to get to know them as people and in their courses and their experiences and their programmings online. The same time that this was going on in the students, faculty and staff are reporting massive concerns about student disengagement, students not showing up to classes, students not turning in things on time, students not participating in support services or office hours, students not coming to programming that was offered in student affairs, and sort of this general, how am I trying, like I'm trying to do things in a very positive way, but I can't seem to get these students to come in and participate at the same time. Those were students that were in college. And you're like, okay, maybe we'll get past it and it will be different. And you look at the K-12 data coming in, students are consistently reporting that they're learning less and that each year it's compounding, particularly in STEM related areas. And that the economic impacts, meaning that less students or families are likely to afford college in some of these areas related to how things are going. So it's not a once and done kind of, let's put an asterisk by this data. It's a shift we have to think about, that as how are we being responsive to our changing needs of students over time, and that changing look of who our student population are, their needs and their concerns. And I know that that's all very sad, so I've added cute pictures of animals to make that data feel a little bit better. So if you like, it's a pig in boots. I don't even know how they got that done. But hopefully have a moment to look at some happy animals and feel a little better about it. So what does this mean for, yes, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, someone in the chat asked they're wondering if the data included both undergrad and graduate students in those surveys.
The breakout reports were undergrad students, but the link is to the College Voice survey, and you can actually mess around. They have Tableau in there, and so you can pull out graduate student responses if you want to. So yes, but they're not pulled out specifically in those slides.
And I love the pig in boots. That's really cute.
It's good. Any other questions or comments for everyone? Hearing none. I just want to see, how does that national data align with your experiences? And you are welcome to share in chat, but you are also welcome to just unmute and share if you would like to do anything around that. But what if we asked our students? So what if we're like, okay, here's all this national data, but what's going on with our students and what is happening in our space now? In these things. So I want to give you some instances of places that came out of the pandemic and started engaging in student focus groups, having conversations with students about their learning and what was going on with disengagement. So in New England, there was a student focus group survey that got together asking students about their sort of disengagement with the support structures that went around classroom time, one of which was office hours. And the response from students as part of this was, oh my gosh, I would never bother my faculty during office hours. That is their quiet work time when they're in their office wanting to get work done. Like, I'll just email them and find a time to engage with it. That was a total group of missed students, and it tracked outside of just that group of students, where students had come in and not been socialized into the same way that we would traditionally kind of socialize our students to our campus environment, had just a complete misunderstanding of office hours. People changed the names of what that offering was, whether it was student hours or someone used like lurking time, like I'll be lurking in my office, come and find me, or what that was. But just a complete mismatch on students, what they thought that was about, and the opportunities that we're providing to them. Another one was related to student affairs and different offerings that were happening. And so the student affairs programs were like, we're trying to figure out which things to keep going. Students say they want certain activities, but then students aren't coming and participating in these activities. In this specific case, it was yoga in the student center. And students were like reporting, yes, we strongly support and want this offering, but students were not coming at a way. And so when they were looking at it as part of a program unit review process, they're like, do we continue offering it? Do we not? Got students together and had conversations with them, and the students reported, oh, I don't actually want to go to yoga. I just want to be at a place that offers that. Like, I want to be in a campus environment that's an option. And there are students that do that, and that's great and that's fine. But if I was at a place and that didn't have that option, I wouldn't feel like it was a good place for me, but I don't myself want to go, which doesn't line up with our metrics that we have around, you know, is it participation? Is it full? Is it this? But if you took yoga away, the students were going to be very, very upset. So how do we navigate that space? How do we think differently about students going like, I like that this is an option versus my willingness to engage in all of these spaces, and how that plays out and how we make decisions, the data that we collect, and when we decide whether we want to keep doing something or not. The last one I'll share was from another student focus group conversation. This one was in Texas, and it was about students who were leaving class, not attending classes, or would come into class, particularly lectures, and listen for a second and then leave. And the faculty were like, what in the world? I can't engage in teaching these students if they aren't going to participate and show up. The students reported, I taught myself how to learn during the pandemic. So I learned where to go online to teach myself a concept. I know like what I like to do and how I like to learn a concept. And so if I come in and I'm like, oh, I'm not going to understand this in an hour, I'll just leave and go teach myself. Now, there's a lot of different things that are happening in there. Two things that you can consider up front is one, where students are learning can shift in places where we don't see it. So a student could still, let's say, do well on an assignment or in a task related to this knowledge, but they didn't get it from the way sitting in a lecture hall or attending an online class. They got it somewhere else. It also means that how do we help students find trusted resources of places that we're like, this is a good instance for you to teach yourself, or this is a good resource about the way that we're trying to talk about it, instead of just disengaging in that visible way. So is it disengagement, or is it shifts that are happening that we need to think differently about how we meet with our students, the resources we provide our students, and how these things fit together. So some of this can be, we don't want misunderstandings, and the best way for us to engage in that is to have some conversations, but we also need to know, like, how do we support our students and what do we want to engage in, and what does that look like and entail? We know from years of research that students come to us with a vast variety of beliefs and experiences related to assessment and the kinds of things that they think are important to their learning and are not. With that, how they believe this entails how they approach it to like, do I really need to study? Is this going to be a good demonstration of my learning? Do I just need to show up and go through the motions? Whatever that might be. If they don't think that it's fair, if they think it's like, well, this is just about me doing work to do work, they will disengage from the task and they will not put in the same level of effort. So we're actually not even getting good demonstrations of learning. But the part that I think is really important for where our students are today is that the act of going through an assessment can also impact how students view themselves as learners or capable of learning. So if we have students that are feeling behind, students that are like, I'm unsure what's going on or what I'm doing in here, and then they're getting given something that says, show me what you know in whatever way that might be, and they're going, oh, I don't, do we end up in self-fulfilling prophecies of I can't learn X and I didn't do well in this, and so that proves that I'm not able to learn these things and go into there, or not. And we also know for years as well, since the 90s specifically, how students prefer to be assessed. That is shifting today, and so I think engaging in what are options we can give to students so they have a variety of ways that they can go about getting assessed can be beneficial. But students have opinions that impact their engagement with all of these things. And if we don't understand the students, their opinions, and how that relates to engagement, then we can't create things that are really meaningful to get them incited in learning. I apologize, this is also really hard to read, but this website is fabulous. McCrindle does research on generation things. It's an Australia research company. And the point that I want to make here, I'll give you a little box to zoom in, is that students, as we shift generationally, want more engagement, collaboration, empowerment, co-creation in their learning environment and their learning process versus tell me what I need to do to get it done. However, we have that balance of I'm really busy, there's a lot going on, give me my clear expectations to succeed, but also I want an opportunity to co-create with you and how we kind of navigate that space. This is just another fun one. I like this one because of all the fun parts down here, but I will give you a box to focus in here. You can explore these later and enjoy the different infographics. Part of this too is that the ways in which students see effective engagement in learning environments also shifts over time from I'm okay to sit and listen to I want to facilitate. I want that flexibility. I don't know why I need to have something be a closed book exam. You have to explain that to me and convince me why this matters to my learning and reality and all of the things that go around that. And also that same sort of collaboration contribution. If I don't see how I fit in being a part of this, then I don't want to be engaged in it. I will not participate in that same way. This is really hard though, because we have a history in assessment of having kind of specific elements that are elevated up or more dominant at times than student voice or student perceptions and student opinions. And part of that is we just don't value narrative or personal experience in the same way as quantitative data. We're like, yes, but how many? And, give me a number and I want a dashboard for these things. We also rationalize away student voice. The amount of time that I've heard people, well-intentioned in institutions say, oh, but that's not how students feel, right after a student told them how they felt about something, or like, you don't feel that way, you mean this. It's too many. So understanding that students are their expert of their own lived experience, and that, if we were them, we'd be them. How can we understand what we need to be able to meet in the middle and engage in this is a very difficult part of our assessment history. Also, when you look at the tools that we use, the theories that are employed, the standard of measurements that are engaged in, most of them come from studies of white students and mostly white institutions. And so we look to that and then default kind of setting, and that's not challenged. And when we go like, well, what should we try differently in this? And we do value certain demonstrations of learning over others. So we say, show me that you know in this way in front of me at this time, and limit it for students instead of providing them opportunities to say, how do you know that you know this? What does that look like? What would that entail? How does that fit together? I will also say, part of in getting into any student work, besides the sort of dominant elements of assessment that are there from history of engaging in assessment, there are lenses that we have that impact what we think this work is about and where students fit in it or not. So I want to just give you 4. Each of these they're like the Cosmo quiz of assessment, I like to call them. They're belief statements, and you fill it out and you're like, I agree with this, or I believe this to be true, not this is happening at my institution. And you see kind of where you fall out in the different groupings. And there's one that's for student affairs and there's one that's for assessment. So if you want to do something fun later today in your day, I encourage you to do like what's your philosophy of assessment. But the point is, when you get into like, where do students fit in student voice, it depends on how you're thinking about what assessment is and what it isn't. So if you're thinking about assessment as measurement, like, okay, well, I have to have something that's a pre and a post, and I need to, have it needs to be comparison. I need to be able to generalize. If you're like, well, that N size is too small for me to take action, and you're like, but your program is 2 students. One of them's not doing well. Like, maybe we should talk about it. Then thinking about where student voice fits in part of measurement can be a different kind of conversation. And I say this not to say that we don't need to consider measures in assessment. We do. We want to make sure that we're doing this work. But if it's the only lens of how I think about what assessment is, then it's going to limit my ability to engage in some kind of meaningful ways of working with my student populations and student voice. If we have a compliance mentality, this is where you're like, I filled out your report. Why are you still asking me questions? Or if you feel like you gave a lot of data, but you have no idea where that data went, you're like, I've done assessment, check that box off. If you feel like it's bureaucratic, if it's divorced from your practice, and all those kinds of things, then that's a compliance mentality. And so the point of that is, it's like, well, I don't need to involve students. That's not required. Or if it's, not on a form for something, then why would I have students participate in this space? So it can kind of limit where you think or don't think students can happen involved. Teaching and learning or co-curricular learning, this lens is really more like, I have questions about my own practice. If I'm offering a program to students, is it having the impact that I want? Are students learning the things that I care about in here or not? If I'm a faculty member and I'm changing something in my class, is it working for my students? Which ones and in what ways? Then these are actually practice-driven questions that we have that we want to look at and think about, how do I advance my learning in meaningful ways? And student feedback becomes incredibly important and useful to that. Is this working for you? What did you think that I said? Where are you concerned and confused? Can be a great opportunity to engage in that. And lastly, the 4th lens, you had measurement, compliance, teaching and learning or co-curricular learning, and then student-centered approaches are really like, well, at the end of the day, the student is the one who leaves here with the knowledge and the skills. And if they aren't aware of what they know and can do, what's the point? How can they go and talk to someone about like, I've learned to do these things and I have confidence in my ability to do this and that. So are they aware of our intentionality behind a lot of the things that we've designed? Do they understand their learning outcomes, and how are they thinking about this assessment as a way to help them engage in that learning process over time? So in here, you can actually have things like students identify problems and create solutions for those problems and really be the leaders in their student learning journey and how that fits. Because if you think about the spectrum of sort of student involvement, where we currently involve students in the, from like, you are the person that you are assessed, you're the other, like you just give me the assessment information and that's how you're involved in the process, to you're identifying a problem that you want to solve at our institution. It kind of falls in different spaces as we move through. Some is we decide what to change for students. So we'll say, students aren't doing well here. I'll make this change and this will make it better. To, well, maybe we should have like a student on the committee and a student sitting there like, what is assessment? Why am I here? And why are there all these acronyms? And they don't say anything because they're afraid to speak up, potentially. To where we kind of go, oh, we put this thing together without your input. Do you like it? Because it's about to go out next week. Do you have any problems with it? And at that point, they're like, well, it's too late, and anything I'd want to change, like if it's going out, sure, you just have my sign of approval and move on. To where we can also go, well, how are students different? Where are we seeing differences in disaggregated data? To blaming the students for that, well, we just need these students to be more like these students, and then they'll be fine. To going, wait a minute, maybe there's organizational structures and barriers that are getting in the way of our student journey. How would we know what those are and what students are experiencing? Maybe we should survey them or talk to our students and engage in it. So there's a wide spectrum and space, and these are just some examples of steps along the way to think about where are you comfortable, where does it make sense, and where would you like students or student voice to be involved in your assessment process. So I want to then talk about, well, how and where could we involve them? Well, let me give you some areas. Please add more to this as we go. But I want to give you a variety of areas that you can think about involving students, but pretty much, well, it's classroom or co-curricular assessment. So anywhere that you're engaging in a classroom learning or a co-curricular learning experience for students at the programs, if you want to see how are students learning across classes, or at the unit level, how are things working within our unit and student affairs, even at the institution or general education level, it's a great place. Pretty much anywhere that you want students to learn something from an experience, you have opportunities to involve them. And several of these will look very similar, just at different levels, but I think it's helpful to think about them within the specific levels. So within thinking about students in classroom or co-curricular assessment, really you just want to think about where do I have opportunities to involve students in the process of teaching and learning, and whether that's choice in terms of how they're going about showing learning, whether that's the choice in the pathways they take to get to their learning, whether that's checking in and saying, do you understand what we're doing? Is this working for you? And in what ways, those kinds of things. So you can think about it in the form of assignments, what tasks are we giving to our students? What opportunities do they have for choice within those tasks? But also, can they create these tasks even themselves? Syllabus, how do we talk about the role of students or the involvement that I want from students? Because sometimes we'll say, you have all these very limiting language maybe in the syllabus, and then we're like, this is an environment where you can participate, and they're like, sounds very suspicious. So how are these things lining up? You can think about it from a pedagogical perspective, from teaching students evaluative thinking. How do you get them to think about assessing themselves and their own work over time? You can also say, our students, I need them to engage in analyzing data sets. And so I want to do a partnership with our assessment office to have students analyze, de-identified data from a survey they took with context that they have about these student experiences to help, put it together, present it. You're doing quantitative reasoning, communication skills, and that's nice. I've seen it too with marketing programs. So going to students and saying, we want to help our students understand what the learning outcomes are for our program. How should we put it together? Go to a PR, go to a marketing class and say, we'll be your, employer, basically, like we'll be the person that you're responding to, and or your client, I guess, in that sense, and put together the situation, go through that process. They've got something for the portfolio, but you've got great information for it, goes there. Tasks from student employment is a huge area of thinking about it and looking at, when you have student job descriptions, aligning that to desired learning outcomes and saying, when I'm giving you these tasks, this is an opportunity to be working on this learning. Are you seeing that? Can you think about these artifacts from your student employment as something that's an instance of these learning that we want to see here? And also just helping understand the student experience in these spaces. So let me give you some kind of like deeper dive examples on that. So one can be have students write and develop learning outcomes. This does not mean they write and develop all your learning outcomes. There are certain things that we're like, I need you to know this. You don't know the context. You don't understand the thinking behind this. This is really important. And I don't care really if you're like, whatever. This is important and it's a part of this course. It's a part of this experience. It's a part of this program. And that's what we're going to do. But what else do you want? Or if this is what I want you to learn, how would you write that? What would that look like? How would that entail in engaging in it? Have students identify literature. What are you reading on this topic? What activities would you like to see around this? Who is someone that you're reading that's not on my radar that I should be thinking about in this space? You can have them grade themselves or each other, any kind of peer feedback processes. Caveat on this, if you want to engage in it, you have to teach students how to do it. They don't inherently have this skill set. So you can't just be like, grade each other, and they'll be like, I like Anne, your work seemed fine. Hope you have a nice semester. And like, no, you have to engage in the larger, like, what are we looking for? And this is where you're teaching that evaluative thinking. What kinds of things are you looking for? How would you see it? What evidence do you need to back it up? That kind of thing. Again, have students design the assignment. If you want to have them demonstrate some learning, how would they want to demonstrate it? We used to do these assignment charrettes. It's a fancy term for an assignment design workshop. It's a French architecture education term, but it also sounds cooler. You're like, do you want to go to an assignment charrette? People are like, yeah, maybe. You're like, you want to go to an assignment design workshop? They're like, I have plans. But charrettes are people that do it. We did one with students where we gave them the learning outcomes from their courses and said, design the tasks of what you think someone would need to do to demonstrate they've met this learning outcome. And their tasks were like longer than a semester. Or like, oh, this would be like a 2-term kind of engagement of parts, but incredibly innovative and deep, and an opportunity to kind of get some ideas in that. You can think aloud on assignment intent. A lot of students are like, I have no idea what you just asked me to do. So when you introduce an assignment, you're like, here's what I'm asking you to do. Here's why I'm asking you to do it. Here's what this means to these other things. Now repeat back to me what you think I said, or what did you hear that I was talking about in this assignment space? So kind of help make clear for students that area. Students write exam questions for future classes as their kind of assignment. So if you have to create different levels of difficulty on exam questions, this is very helpful too when you have like, I need a variety of exam questions that I can rotate through, have the students help kind of create some of those spaces. And photo and social media campaigns has been one that's been popping up more recently, where you're like, here's, hashtag for learning outcomes. Students take pictures of themselves wherever they are that they're doing it, or take videos of their experience of how they're learning, or whatever that might be, and share it along with them. So point of this is not that this is a comprehensive list. It's more of, there's a ton of ways that we can do this. And a lot of it is, instead of I have to figure this out in the time that I'm constrained with all the other things that I have to do, I can do this with my students, or I can involve my students in this process, engaging in it. If you're interested in any of the student employment stuff, Iowa Grow, Wisconsin Grow is a great example of this. What they have is student employees. This one's not the job description. If you're interested in that, I'll add an example to the slides. This one is every student that's a student employee has a monthly check-in, like a 10-15 minute check-in with their supervisor that asks these 4 questions, which is, how is this job fitting in with your academics? What are you learning here in this student employment that's helping you in school? What are you learning in class that you can apply here at work? And can you give me a couple examples of things you've learned that you think you'll use in your profession? Now, the first time you start doing this, students are like, I don't know, nothing. Why are you asking me? Because they have not been asked to make these connections. It's, I go to work, I go to class, I do these things. It's not an interlinking. So you're actually helping them start to go through like, wait, should I reflect in action and think about where there might be connection points? Yes, you should. So the first couple of these, do not be disheartened. It's a developmental process. They will get there, but starting those conversations and helping them think through it, by the end of a term, they're like, I'm doing this and I was applying this in this space, and they start to generate it on their own. So that's a really cool project. A lot of stuff's been written about it if you want to take a look. On the faculty side of things, if you want a resource around like, yeah, but how do I make my assignments clearer for students, and what we're thinking about the student one specifically, the Transparency in Learning and Teaching Project, the TILT project, is a great resource for this. Marianne Winklemas did research from a National Science Foundation study that found if you get clear in your assignment prompts, you can close equity gaps. Student learning. Part of this, if I don't know what you're asking me to do, I'm not going to do it very well because I don't understand those places. So we know students want more clarity. We know they want clear expectations, and it focuses on getting clear your purpose. So why do I have to, why? I got a lot going on. Why do I have to do this? How is this going to help me? Where am I going to use this work? And then what do I have to do? And then is there anything that you can tell me that I'm on the right track? How am I going to be judged? What kind of things should I watch out for? What pitfalls? So purpose, task, criteria. If you like checklists, there's some nice checklists on the Tilt website that you can kind of run your assignment through as well. Another fun project you can think about too that's student voice and students like making short videos of each other. So from the social media side of things, it's a project that said "Don't misunderstand me," where students they started this originally when this first project was done at Stanford. It was done as like a very nice, well filmed production. Now it's much more students are submitting videos that are then compiled together on it. But they answer one misunderstanding a teacher might have about me, but in reality, the truth is this. For Stanford, it was focused on low income students and their experience of like, you're actually assessing privilege in these tasks because you don't see the effort I had to put in to try to get this done. And it took me 3 bus rides and trying to get access to this. And like, so by the time I could finally get to doing this part, all of these other things were barriers in my way. And I wish you knew that it wasn't that I didn't care. I wasn't putting in time or I wasn't trying to do these things. It was these other concept parts to it. This is a great space. It's a quick, easy reality check, I think, for where our students are. If we do have a disconnect from our community and a disconnect from where our students currently are, is where do I feel misunderstood by this institution? Like, where do you think you're helping me? That's just not, because we've missed the mark, because there's a misunderstanding there, and students are very quite comfortable sharing all kinds of things in video form, which is a fascinating thing as well. And oh yeah, the idea of one Miss for she's cool. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm catching up on chat. I apologize. And the rubric side of things, you can also say if you're already using rubric, so this isn't adding more work, this is doing your work differently. There's a research project that was done in Canada that looked at if we gave the students the rubrics, students submit with it, here's the score that I gave myself and why. So I'm not just like, I got 4 points because I'm amazing, but like, here's based on the grading criteria. And then what do I need to do to advance? This additional question for students, they were like, I don't know, study harder, read more, be a better person, like non-helpful targeted parts. That then the faculty, when they went through it, they're like, here's my score and why. So like, are we aligned there? But also, that's not what you need to work on. You need to work on making an argument, or you need to work on this one area. But the disconnect between where a student sort of not only where they thought they were, but what they need to do to improve, hugely informative for the faculty that did it. They did this collectively across a program. And when they first started it, students and faculty were like not in alignment. And by the end of the program, they were. And that's part of that evaluative thinking that you're teaching a student to look at their work, make judgment calls on it, and then determine, how do I improve? What do I need to do to get better? How do I engage in this work? If you're also like, I don't have time for rubrics, students can develop them. Students created a creative writing and a creativity in arts rubric because when they saw the one that they were going to be graded on, they were like, this does not capture creativity. And so they created a rubric that's now used to this day by the program to look at student creativity in it. The point is, we don't have to solve these things all by ourselves. We are tired, overworked. We got 8 jobs, 10 titles. Like, we still in education at this point because you love what you're doing and you love students, you want to do it. But we don't have to solve these things on our own or be like, I don't have time to make a rubric. Like, we can crowdsource this with our community of students who are also like, I don't know how I fit or how I'm a part of this, but I want to be. I want to be a part of this institution. I want to be a part of this. And we're like, help us do this and participate in that. And it can be a really beneficial project. If you are still not convinced on any of these things, I give you the work of John Hattie. His 2023 book just came out in the 2nd edition. It is a spider killer. Oh, I apologize. It's not a spider killer. You should save the spiders. It's a thick book is what I mean by that. And do whatever you want with your spiders in your areas. We were talking about spiders earlier and I was like, I have conflicted ethical things with that too. But the point is, it's a meta-analysis related to, does any of this stuff matter? And while we know that context is different and that some of our things that worked before are not going to work for students today, it still is very effective for students that any interaction that I'm having, whether it's student affairs, whether it's curricular, whether it's in and of us having a conversation, I should be able to answer these questions for myself is what am I learning from this experience? How does it build upon or add to prior learning experiences? What's expected of me? How can I prepare for success? And where else will this learning be applied or applicable? And that's stuff that we've been hearing in the job conversations, in the assignment redesign work. These things are not new. There's an institution that actually put these on like little laminated cards that they had students put in their wallets and like carry around with them and be like, you should be able to answer these questions. But we should also be able to answer these questions for ourselves. And so if we can't answer this, how can our students possibly start to figure it out and think about it? So that's sort of classroom, co-curricular examples and things of that nature. Ready for program or unit level assessment. A lot of this is the same. It's thinking about where do we have student voice? How can we help our students have us make sense of data? Undergraduate research is a great opportunity here. It's a high impact practice. Our students can be engaged as the researchers to look at our programs, to answer questions that we have, but maybe don't have the time to engage in. I really like the one of where you write a letter to an incoming student on what you wished you'd known or been told. It's a great source of information. It's very therapeutic for our students, so it's a by-message way. Here are some just additional things that you can think about, whether it's offering internships for students within your program, whether it's having a graduate student research assistant that can oversee some of these things, whether you hire a student worker to be kind of your student person related in this, or if you're working as part of your degree program, we're like, no, we engage in student works as they go. Examples of this one, if you want, the Curious Aggies is a student assessment researchers program where students are hired on as researchers. They're trained in undergraduate research. They work with a graduate student who has a faculty member, and they basically are like sent out to do questions that faculty and staff have about their work. They're like, we will come and assess it for you. And they come in around those things that we want to have the student perspective as part of it. Student Learning Analyst is another example of this from Bowling Green State University. They put together sort of what the learning outcomes are for the analysts and what their duties are, and they map this into a portfolio for the students as they leave, which is kind of a nice way to think about learning. So you're getting the learning related to it, but you're also involved in other places. And you can also just ask students about their learning journey. Like, where did you learn these things that we thought you were getting? Did you learn it where we intended it or somewhere else? And then how important do you think it is? And that's a great question to ask our students, particularly today, because they'll be like, yeah, I learned it, but it's not important. And if we're like, oh my gosh, this is so important, you need to know this so much, then having an understanding of where we have disconnect from our students can be very, very important. The next couple slides are just questions for you to think about in ways that you might use this at a unit level or at a program level. So I don't want to go over these. These are just resources later for you as you're like, I wonder. These are some questions that we could ask about the student experience. So if you're thinking about how that might fit, and it's important to ask that. This is a study that was done in Ohio where it looked at where the students from the first time they think about applying to when they show up at class for their first day. And in this data behind it, it looks like a game of chutes and ladders. It depended on who you talked to, on what day, if they knew to send you to the right office or not. So you can imagine by the time I got through that, how much I feel like I belong, or how can we better understand our student experience and their student flow. From the program view and side of things, these are questions that you can ask. So again, I won't run over it, but it's just things that you can think about related to where student voice or student involvement can be helpful to you understanding how the program fits together and connects. And so I just offer those as resources. And then for students and institutional assessment, it's all the same things that we've been talking about. You just do it a level up so they can still be your interns, they can still be your researchers, they can still be on the committee, we can still be asking them where they are in these instances. And we can do it in ways that help us find if we're being equitable in our learning. So there was a study that was done looking at, are there a difference between assignment types, grades, and student demographics? And the answer was yes. There are certain types of assignment that were privileging certain student groups over others. And students were engaged then on what are your perceptions of these assignments? How do you perceive and also think about your performance? And from that, they were able to craft a faculty professional development plan, change around the assignments that were related to it, and close those equity gaps for students. And that was something they were looking at institutionally, not just within a program in that space. I say all of this to be like, pretty much whatever you want to do, you can do in students. Just think about them and engage and have them be a part of your process of learning. and how all of that fits in. And if we do that, our students will have a much better experience that lines up with Peter Felton and Leo Lambert's work. This is my last slide for you. And then there's just resource slides after that, which is for students to really feel that they're learning. To overcome our disengagement, students need to have that sense of belonging. They need to be inspired to learn, not transactional. Have a web of significant relationships with people that I can go to. And I'm exploring questions of meaning and purpose. I want to become a part of a discipline. I don't want to complete tasks. How do I join a larger community of which I want to be a part, or a profession, or whatever that might be? And those things will all help us out.